Hello, I'm Sinta Ebersohn. I'm the founder of Get Up and Grow, which is an online community where we consciously cultivate resilient families in all aspects of life. With me here today is Karen Badenhorst. She's a social worker who focuses on parenting and personal and professional development. Karen, welcome and thank you so much for agreeing to participate.
Hi, good day, Sinta.
Please tell us a bit about your work as a social worker and how you came to focus on parenting and what that means.
Yes, Sinta, I am a social worker in private practice, and 30 years ago, when I started my career at a welfare organization as a social worker, I also had my own children, and I just realized that I don't have any skills to raise these children. Even if I studied social work,
Mm.
I am lacking practical skills to raise these boys. And I did some research, and I got to parent effectiveness training, and me and my husband did the course, and it really changed our lives. We raised our boys with these skills. Today they are 33 years old and 30 years old. And at the age of 40, I became pregnant again.
Hmm.
Not lump. And I just felt I had to refresh my skills. And when I refreshed my skills, I did the course again. Of course, you forget the stuff and you
Mm.
fall into old patterns. And when I did the course again, I just realized this is so good. I must share it with other people, other parents. And yeah, so 15 years ago, I became a PT instructor, and I present parent effectiveness training. That's one of the programs that we present.
That's wonderful. And you know the saying that always says children don't come with a manual? It is so true. And we don't know how to parent. We know how to love our children because that comes naturally, but we don't really know how to parent. But we rely a lot on how we were parented. So we have programming that we get from our parents that they got from their parents. So there's a lot then, and people often say, I was raised this way and I turned out okay. So I'm going to do the same thing, which is not necessarily the best thing for our children, right?
Absolutely, and a lot of parents also say that parenting must be natural.
Mm.
But when we look at parenting, we look at relationship, and relationships doesn't come natural.
Mm.
Um, we need skills to navigate our relationships effectively. And I think just our divorce rate in South Africa,
Mm.
tells us that not a lot of people have effective skills to navigate their relationships effectively. And
Mm.
if we get skills, and if we are open for self-development and new skills, we just make it so much easier for ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah. So, Corin, you're going to tell us a lot about effective communication in parenting. Before we get into the details, can you just mention some of the techniques that you're going to be talking about so that we can just get people who are watching this video an idea of what the things are we going to talk about, and then let's go into the detail. Some effective communication techniques.
Okay. So when we look at relationships consist out of practical communication.
Mhm.
So when me and you are in a relationship, it's all about what we say, how we say it,
Mhm.
and when we say it.
Okay.
So these are so the communication skills are the building blocks um, for having a good relationship with my skills, with my children.
Mhm.
And we focus in parent effectiveness training. We focus on four main skills, and the first one is the active listening skill, and we'll talk a little bit later about that.
Mhm.
And then also a confrontation skill. When my child does something that I don't like, how do I confront my child? And then a big part of our communication is discipline. How do I discipline my child? And hopefully during this hour talk, we're going to change that word discipline because we don't like the word discipline.
Mhm.
Then the last part of my parenting or communication is the values that I want to give my child.
Yes.
How do I give the things that I believe in? How do I give that to my child? How do I communicate my values that I believe in to my child? So that's in very short what our practical communication skills consist of.
Okay. Well, that sounds fantastic. Let's jump right in and start with active listening. It's a word that we hear so often. What is it really all about?
Okay, Sinta, I think before we go to active listening, let's just talk about um, what is my aim as a parent and what do I
Mhm.
want to achieve when that child is 18?
Okay.
We want to raise children that is resilient.
Hmm.
We want to raise children that's emotional intelligent.
Hmm.
We want to know if we drop our child at their first work or at college or university when they're 18, 19 years old, that they will have the ability to cope. They will be able to problem solve. They will be able to manage themselves. They will be able to be emotional intelligent and have good relationships with the people around them. Um, I always say to my husband, I want our children to be whole people,
Mm.
but that's not always possible.
Yeah.
We all have challenges. We all have gaps in our parenting and how we were raised. But I think all parents want that.
Mm.
So to come back to your question, how do we raise a child that when they leave the house, they are okay, they are
Mm.
confident, they've got a good self-esteem. Um, and all our skills that we teach, contribute to that uh, goal at the end. Active listening is one of the most important skills that we teach parents. What is every child's biggest emotional need? I don't know if you can perhaps answer me. What do you
I
think?
th- Doesn't it starts with being heard and being seen?
Absolutely, Santa, you are so right. Our children's biggest need is to be understood, to experience understanding, and then the biggest need is acceptance.
Mm.
Our children want to feel that we as parents fully accept them as a person, as a unique person, and also as a separate person from the parent.
Yes.
Very often we as parents have got this ideas, that we've got mini me's,
Mm.
and or we lack certain stuff in our life. I wasn't a good rugby player or netball player, and now my child must be that for me.
Mm.
And I think to see your child separate from you is very, very important, and to see your child as a unique person is very important. So when we look at active listening, so the active listening comes in how I manage my child's emotions. So
Mhm.
in PT, we talk about our child goes out of balance, and that means that our children has got very big emotions or feelings. Our children doesn't have the ability to communicate to us how they feel. Basically, because they don't have the brain development yet.
Mm.
Our children can't tell us, Mum, I am so frustrated. I am feeling lonely. Mum, I'm missing you. You are working so hard. You're not spending time with me. If I think of my teenager in the home now, she's 15 years old. She doesn't have the ability to say to me, my body is changing. I'm busy finding my own identity. Who am I? Am I good enough for my peers? they don't have that ability. So how do they communicate that to us? They communicate that to us through behavior. And very often it's terrible behavior. They roll their eyes, they slam the doors, they throw a tantrum. And what do we as parents do? We focus on that behavior. Don't do that. Don't roll your eyes. Don't slam the. I'm going to take off that door. Go back and close the door again.
Mm.
So we focus so much on the slamming door that we miss our child's emotions. So I take a great deal of my program. I spend time to teach parents the underlying emotions under all behavior. And what lies under that emotion? Under all emotions, every child has got a need. So we teach parents to see the need and not focus on their behavior. And that process we call active.
That's going to require some emotional intelligence from the parents as well.
You are so right, Sinta. It's a very difficult skill for parents. This technique asks from us as parents to put on our oxygen mask and to first help ourselves before we can help our child that is in distress. And very often this means that I must first resolve my childhood trauma, perhaps, or my frustrations in my life, or my stressors. A great deal of my program is about self-care for the parent. If I, as parent, doesn't look after myself and do self-care and spend time alone without the children and do physical activities and work on my marriage and have hobbies, I get so sucked up in parenting and that frustration and sometimes anger. We often dump on our children, and that's very unfair. So, yes, what do they say when we get on a plane with our children? Put on your oxygen mask. You must first breathe and come into balance before you can effectively help your child. And how do we help? We help through the active listening.
As I'm listening to you, I agree more and more about what you said. We are all in relationships with everybody. And what you've just talked about is actually applicable to all our relationships. You mentioned working on your marriage. It's the same thing we need to do for our partners or our spouses, not so?
So, Sinta, what's so great about our programs is that today we're talking about the parent-child relationship. We also have programs for the workplace, for teacher-learner relationships, for the youth, peer relationships. And these skills that we teach the parents is the exact same skills that I teach the exco of a hospital at the moment, or the teacher in the class. It's exactly the same skills. So very often parents say they first apply these skills in their marriage or at work before they apply it with their children. So yes, it is universal, practical communication skills that you use in all relationships.
And if we model that behavior with our adult relationships to our children, that's how they're going to learn. They're going to see it, how it's done, and take it from there.
Sinta, we want to teach children how to make their beds, how to eat vegetables, how to study hard. But I think one of the most important things that we can teach our children is how to navigate relationships. And you are so right. If I can master myself and I can master my relationships with skills, that is one of the biggest things I can I can model to my children? How do I deal with other people's emotions? How do I set boundaries? How do I navigate through conflict?
Mm-hmm.
And my children were raised with these skills, and I can't tell you how satisfying it is when I see the boys applying these skills with their girlfriends, or
Yes.
my daughter applying these skills with her friends.
Mm.
And that's what you want. You want to teach your children to be emotional intelligent.
Wonderful. So, how do I listen if my child is feeling some of those deep emotions and acting out? I don't quite like the word so much, but they're feeling deep emotions and they're acting on it. How do I, as a parent, listen actively?
So we get basic listening skills, and that is where when our child throws behavior at us or acting out, as you say, um, we must first, with our body and our eyes, attend to the child. We must
Mm-hmm.
show that we are there for the child and that we are willing to help the child. And then the second part is all about absolutely ignoring the behavior in that moment, and not to focus on the behavior. And that can be slamming off the door, rolling off the eyes, um, throwing a tantrum on the floor. So we can't talk to our children about the behavior when they are out of balance. Because what happens to my brain when I'm out of balance? I've got little thinking and a lot of emotion.
Mm.
So the moment I experience stress, emotions, my frontal cortex go smaller. I can't
Mm.
think properly. So it's not the right time to reprimand your child or to influence your child or to teach your child anything. So we must first get rid of the emotions. So ignore the behavior. We're going to deal with the behavior when the child is back into balance. And then we're going to say, Nisha, I really didn't like you slamming the door so hard this morning. We don't slam doors in this house, and I understand that you were angry, but please, let's. I don't like that behavior. So you will manage the behavior, but not when the child is having the big emotions. So when the child's having the big emotions, they throw behavior at us, and we must go behind the behavior, and we must take our shoes off and we must get into the shoes of the child. And while we are staying calm, in balance, we must think, what is this child feeling at the moment? So we must actually guess what the
Mm.
feeling. And if Misha slams the door, I can think that, well, perhaps she's very, very upset. I will identify that emotion within myself, and then I will communicate that emotion to her. And I
Mhm.
will say something to her like, yo, I can see you really had a bad day. You are so angry or upset.
Mm.
And the moment I put that emotion out in the air, she experienced, wow, somebody is getting me. Somebody is understanding me.
Mm.
I can relax. Hopefully, after you've active listened, the child comes back into balance again. And then that opens communication. You are um, you can have open flow communication, and we can solve the problem if necessary. So, Cinta, it's all about creating the space for the child. It's
Mm.
all about creating space. Children may feel emotions is always okay. And it's, yeah, so active listening is about accepting the child's emotion. We don't have to accept the behavior, but we must accept the emotion. and allowing that child to feel and creating the safe space for understanding and acceptance.
Mm. Karen, you're explaining it so well, and I'm so glad you are, because it's something that's often misunderstood. People often teach when children throw tantrums, ignore the behavior. But if you see it in context, it's not ignoring the behavior, it's very much about the timing. It's acknowledging the emotion and then addressing the behavior at a later stage when the balance is back. And that's very important. I think that's often misunderstood.
Absolutely. We've got a behavior window. I call it the GPS for relationships. And in that window, a part of the window is the no problem area. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we are all in balance. That's the lacquer space.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we can chat and talk about unacceptable behavior. That's where we influence our children. That's where we build relationships. But we can't do that when the child or I am out of balance.
Yeah, very true. And that's very important to be aware of that all the time. It's like we need to gauge where our children are to determine how we respond.
Absolutely. So we teach children the question, parents the question, who owns the problem? And
Mm-hmm.
in this case, the child owns the problem. It's not me that's out of balance. And I don't have to go out of balance because my child is out of balance.
Mm.
But I must help my child to get in balance again.
Yes, very well said. So what about confrontation? Is that the same as conflict for you, or is it different?
No. So it's not the same as conflict. So with active listening, the child owns the problem. With confrontation, I own the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Example, I walk past Misha's room. I see this morning her light is still on, her fan is still on, her bed is not made. I walk past the room and I get the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I feel frustrated that she's leaving everything on because it's going to cost me money with my um, uh, electricity bill. She's at school.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have a problem. I own the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And now I must go and confront her. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So here we give parents a big mind shift to explain to children, to parents. It's not about the bad child, sloppy, disrespectful. I own the problem. I never want to break down my child's self-esteem or damage our relationship. But my child is at fault. My child is doing something that's not satisfying one of my needs.
Mm-hmm.
So I must set a boundary. I must start the communication. And instead of saying, Misha, you are bad by not putting off your light in the morning or not making your bed, I'm going to start my communication with, Misha, I really need your help. So the bad guy becomes the helper.
Mm-hmm.
And who doesn't want to help?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to help. Nobody wants to be the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to give you messages because you messages brings a lot of resistance. So we want to change the you messages into I messages. And then we teach parent a three-part confrontation technique, where in this technique we've got three parts, and the one part is the behavior of the child. What is the child doing? And here it is very important not to label the child. So we can't say when you are lazy, because lazy is a label. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to label the child because then we're going to get a lot of resistance. The child's going to say, I'm not lazy. I'm not lazy. So we don't want to label, but we want to focus on what can I see? I see your lamp is on. I see the fan is still working. So I'm going to focus on the behavior and then I'm going to communicate my feeling. So with active listening, it was all about the child's feeling. but I've got a feeling about your behavior, so I'm going to communicate that to you. And the third part, and this parents very often leave out, and that's the effect, the impact of that behavior. So we call this FBI. So my communication is gonna sound like this. Hi, Mish, can I chat to you about something? I really need your help. When you leave in the morning and your light is still on and your fan is still working, I'm really so worried about our electricity bill at the end of the month. I'm not telling the child what to do. I'm not giving orders. I'm talking in such a way that the child must think for herself. She must get to the solution. So this is another thing that parents do. They fix. They fix. They just want to put off your light. Do this. Do that. And children never have the space where they can think for themselves. So this technique gives that space for the child to solve your problem for you and to help you with your problem.
It'd be helpful, yes.
If the child, so I'm sending, we call this iMessages. If I'm sending iMessages again and again and again, and Misha doesn't change her behavior, then we've got conflict. Then we are at the discipline part of the behavior. And that's that's the difference between confrontation is just one way, me to the child. Conflict is both ways.
Okay. So before we look at the discipline, I just want to take a step back and say that saying I own the problem is not an easy thing to do. If I'm the parent and my child didn't do something that I expect them to do, I perceive it as them having a problem, not me having a problem. So there is a shift required to say I own the problem. And am I understanding you correctly in saying it's about the feeling or the emotion that I'm having in response or reaction to what I see?
Absolutely.
And that's where the problem lies.
Absolutely. I've got an unmet need.
Okay, yes. Yeah, that's it.
I've got the unmet need. So that is why I own the problem. Child's not even thinking about the electricity bill. It's not their problem.
If they were, they would have switched it off. Eh?
Yes. Yeah. So the child is doing stuff according to their needs, but very often that clashes with my need, and then I must draw boundaries. So this is all about the iMessage is all about being assertive and about putting boundaries down. We don't want to be
about communicating my need.
Absolutely. And I give you the recipe for that.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. I think your course is definitely a must-do for all parents. So tell me, let's talk about the discipline. I'm curious what you said earlier about changing the word discipline to something else. Let's uncover that.
Yeah, so when I send our messages, child doesn't want to change their behavior, doesn't want to change their behavior. Then me as a parent must realize that perhaps my child also have a need. So now we both are out of balance.
Okay.
So we both own the problem.
So we both have needs that haven't been met.
Unmet needs, yes. So in PT, we teach parents that they've got 3 options of how to deal with that. The first option is where the parent wins and the child loses. This is the very authoritative, strict parent. This parent doesn't see that the child also has a need. It's only my need as a parent that counts. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to talk to you, just do as I say.
Mhm.
So sometimes in our parenting, we must be authoritative. If our child gets up in the morning and say, I don't want to go to school, you're first going to active listen, of course, because that's a door opener. So active listening and iMessages are the door openers for problem solving. We
Mhm.
can't discipline and problem solve if we don't manage the emotions first.
Yes.
So with active listen, I manage my child's emotion, and with iMessages, I manage my emotions. So child doesn't want to go to school, and I will say to her, oh, I can understand. It's the end of the term. You are tired. You just want to sleep in. I understand that 100%. But you know what the rules are. You must go to school. So then I'm authoritative. There's no negotiation or talking about that. You must go to school. That's the rules. When our children are in danger, we must be authoritative.
Mm.
But if that is your only way of parenting, there's very high risks. And the highest risk is damaging the relationship. Because a child that's on the receiving end of an authoritative parent feels that they never have a voice.
Mm.
They can never have a say. They feel that their needs are never met. They must just listen and do. Um, and there's a lot of resentment towards that parent. That this parent also feels guilty because they
Mm.
know it's not always a thing. A parent who use method one, we call it method one, also use punishment and rewards.
Mhm.
So this parent has got power and is using that power. Rewards and punishment works excellent, especially in the small years. But when a parent with punishment and rewards, the child gets used to it. And eventually it phases out and then the parent doesn't have power anymore.
Mm.
When we work with rewards, we create a dependent child. When we work with punishment, we get fear.
Yes.
Fear and dependence is all external motivation of control.
Mm.
We want to work with a child's heart. We want to work internally with a child. So in parent effectiveness training, we take all punishment and rewards out of the parenting. In no relationship, punishment and rewards is effective.
Yeah.
Method two is where the child wins and the parent loses. And that's where the parent says, oh, you can do whatever you want. Want to stay at home? Sure, you can stay at home. The big thing about method two is that the child is unmanageable. There's no boundaries. They struggle in school because there the teacher is authoritative. Um, um, and this child also get the feeling or the idea, or can possibly get the idea that do my parents really care for me? Because I can do whatever I want.
Mm.
Children like structure, they like boundaries. So now we've got this two parenting styles, method one and two. And what a lot of parents do is they switch between these two. They're very strict, then they feel guilty, then they say, oh, we must just now be a little bit softer on the children. And then when we're too soft with the children, we say, listen, it's now time. Ons moet nou weer die bande bietjie stywer trek.
Mm.
So we are between these. And in PT, we teach parents the win-win method. So method 1 and 2 is win-lose, lose-win methods. And we teach parents the win-win method. And that is where we acknowledge the need of the child as well as the parent. So we get that needs through our active listening and our iMessages. We sit around the table, we talk about it, we listen to each other, We share our needs with each other. And we've got 6 steps that we teach parents where we put heads together to make plans for a win-win. And then in that space, we give the child a chance to think and come up with solutions. So in PT, we always want the child to think. We want the child to be independent. We want the child to be creative with problem solving. So you would always ask a child, how do you think we can solve this problem? If the child can't come up with a solution, you as a parent give the solution, and we must all be happy at the end with that solution. So yes, and I don't like the word discipline, because discipline, I think we connect with method 1, strict authoritative. We like to call, Stephen Covey calls this method 3 creative cooperation. If both parent and child has got a voice, and we sit together, we talk and chat and see how can we work out win-wins so that everybody is happy.
It's like a good collaboration between parents and children. And I assume it has to be age appropriate. Obviously, we're not going to have the same conversation or creative cooperation with a 3-year-old that we're going to have with a 13-year-old or a 18-year-old.
Absolutely. But Sinta, with a 3-year-old, you're also going to apply method 3. So when a child jump on the couch, you're not going to shout, get off, don't jump. You're going to miss my couches. You're going to walk to the child. You're going to say, oh, I can see you really want to jump today. You're going to take the child off, and you're going to put the child on the trampoline or outside where they can jump. So we apply this skill from birth. We apply the skill to children. For instance, sleep training is very authoritative, while feeding on demand is more method 3. So we apply this method of parenting from birth. Yeah.
And that's very important, because we need to lay the foundation from day one, and that's how they acquire the skills themselves. So like you said in the beginning, how do we want to send our children off in the world is to have these skills so that they can have good relationships and be resilient and be able to deal with all different kinds of people and personalities out there.
Yeah, and confidence and a good self-esteem and a voice. You know that I'm important. I can also say what I want. I can also get my needs met. But I must also be considerate about other people's needs. So consideration, independence, good self-esteem, resilience, respect, fairness, is all values underlying our parenting methods.
So Karen, I want to ask, as I'm listening to you, it makes sense to say, I have a need, my child has a need, and we need to communicate. Well, firstly, acknowledge everybody's needs, be able to communicate our needs, and then find a way to, or find a solution when we are in a conflict situation. But where's the line? Where do I draw the line between what my need is as a parent and what I believe is right and wrong? And I'm simplifying it very much. And I think maybe we're tying into my values as I'm saying this. I might have a need for my child to clean up after themselves. But is that really a personal need of mine? Or is this a value that I have, and that it's important for me to be tidy and for people to, to teach my children to clean up after themselves? Where do I draw the line between the two?
Yeah,
maybe it's more to it.
No, it's a very difficult thing. Neatness, neatness is a very difficult thing to navigate, because children doesn't have the need to be tidy.
Yeah.
It's just not a need of theirs. So, I always tell my parents, don't sweat the small stuff. And an issue like rooms and tidiness, I am quite a very organized person in my work and in my home, and I very quickly in my parenthood, soon in my parenthood, realized that my children doesn't have that need, and I made a conscious decision that I'm not gonna make tidy rooms a big issue in my house. I'm
Mhm.
gonna model my values to them by having a nice laid table during dinner, by having my TV room ordered, their playroom ordered, my study is neat. So I'm modeling this for them. And I decided that their room is their only space where they can do what they want.
Mhm.
And I'm going to give them that space. And I hope and I pray that one day when they leave the house, they will be neat and and ordered in their own world and in their own rooms. And if they are not, not my problem. I'm not living with them.
Yeah.
It's all about don't sweat the small stuff. For
Mm.
me, it's much more important that their hearts and their thoughts must be in order than their rooms. So yes, modeling is one of the most important methods of giving values to your children. You can model, but at the end, your child makes their own decisions.
Mm.
And we as parents must respect that. We can't make our children like us. So you can influence your child, you can teach your child for 18 years, and then you must realize there's nothing more than I can do. Now I must trust life and the process um, to help my child navigate his own life.
And that's not so easy to do. I know I've experienced it myself also. And I always tell parents that I work with to remember that you've modeled your values. So your children have grown up with an example or many examples of how things can be done, how a life can be lived. And then they go and, as you said, they make their own decisions and they decide what kind of people they want to be. And that is also a beautiful thing that we need to respect and honor. They've seen the good examples. They've had the basic training, or the parenting, if I can call it that. And then beyond that, it's really up to them.
Absolutely. And Cinta, that's why it's so extremely important for children in the 18 years, for parents in the 18 years to also let your child fail.
Yes. Mm.
Let your child fail. If that lunchbox is still on the counter, say yes. My child is learning something today. My child is going to learn to remember his lunchbox tomorrow. I'm not going to take it to school to him. He must he, he must learn. We are so protective of our children. We helicopter parents and lawnmower parents. We just want to make everything easy for our children.
Mm.
Let your child fail. It's okay because that is where learning and resilience happens.
Mm.
Um, and you know what? I'm a PT instructor. I've raised my voice with these skills. The pawpaw is going to hit the fan somewhere. There's
More
no
than once,
guarantee.
for sure.
There's no guarantees.
Mm.
Even if there's no such thing as a perfect parent anyway.
Mm.
But even if you are so skilled and effective in your parenting, and what's important is that you've got a good relationship with your child.
Mm.
That if the fan hits the pawpaw hits the fan, you've got that relationship to manage through the chaos.
Mm.
If you don't have the relationship, it's very hard and difficult.
Mm.
And that's why I say for me, it's much more important to have a good relationship with Misha than to nag about a bed that's not being made Close the door if it's bothering you, or go and make the bed yourself.
Mhm.
That's me. That's me. There's a lot of parents, bed is important for them, so they force their children to make their beds every day. I think it's a very good habit. If you can, from 3, 4 years old, motivate your child to make the bed every morning, I think it's a good habit. And if you've got the energy and the consistency to enforce that, great. I'm not saying it's wrong.
Mm.
Uh, I am a bit more permissive and I am focusing a lot more on the relationship and the vibe in the house and the atmosphere and um, our fun times together and the connection.
Pick your battles, as they say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Karen, you've shared so much valuable information with us. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful. I'm sure everybody who's going to watch this video is going to be uplifted and inspired to apply many of these things. I want to ask you, seeing that we are focusing on resilient parenting, what helpful advice can you give parents when a child is going through a really, really difficult time? So I'm talking about really big life challenges, and they're struggling to function, they're struggling to meet the parents' needs. How can we really get in there if we have a good relationship with them and really support them and guide them to be resilient?
I think, again, as we said in the beginning, is creating the space for the child to go through that, not to wish it away or to deny it. I don't think we must deny um, any hardship that a child is going through. Because a lot of parents say, oh man, it's not so bad. Just get over it.
Yeah.
So we must never deny. And we also mustn't dramatize. It's not the end of the world. So that's our two poles, denying and dramatize. But to get in the middle, and I think to acknowledge what is happening and acknowledge the feelings and make the feelings valid and understanding, very important. Try to understand what the child is going through. And then too, if you don't feel capable or if the child's life is really in danger, is to get help. To go
Mm.
to a therapist or a parenting expert or a psychologist and to support and to help. Um, I said to Misha 2, 3 years ago, Misha, if you want to go to a psychologist, please, I will take you. Because I know, even if we've got a wonderful relationship, she doesn't want to talk to me about everything. And I did take her to a psychologist. And she had 3 or 4 sessions and it was good. So not to be proud as a parent to take your child to a psychologist or to external help. There's help and support for every crisis that we must be in. And then I think to always give the message to your child that there's hope.
Mhm.
We must be the light in the darkness for our children. For them, it's overwhelming. They can't make way. But for them to say, this is okay, we will go through this together. You are not alone. We are
Mm.
standing behind and under and before you, and we are supporting you. That connection, that love, that acceptance, and then that hope to say, something beautiful will come out of this, just to
Mm.
give them that hope and the message that we are not quitters. We are not going to give up. This is terrible. This is hard, but together we're going to go through that. And I think that's the two main things, the acceptance, the validation, and the giving of hope. So
Mm.
that we must give the message to our children that no problem is too big
Mhm.
that you can't solve.
Mm. That's beautiful. Yeah, very important.
That
And
and that builds resilience.
yes, yeah, we can take it on, whatever adversity it is or traumatic experience. It's not too big. It's tough. Might look like it's insurmountable, but eventually we'll get there. And that's where we have probably as parents have the life experience to believe that more than our children can, but we need to also model that belief to them.
Absolutely. And that there's just always a plan to make. You
Mm.
know, there's just always a plan to make. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that helps children to ground and to know that there's a base and there's a foundation.
That's beautiful. Karen, I have a last question for you, because we have a lot of families in our community that are going through divorce, or a parent is facing a dreaded disease, or they've lost a loved one. There's so many hardships that parents and families go through. Going back to how you explained to us to communicate our needs as parents, how do we communicate our needs to our children when we are having such a hard time, or the divorce is just so overwhelming, or the conflict is, or the grief that I'm going through because I've lost my partner, or the fear that I have with dealing with cancer, or whatever the struggles are? How do I communicate my need to take a break, to take some time out, as they say, or to just have some space to my children without making them feel unwelcome or unwanted or even unsafe?
Yeah. Yeah, so hopefully you've got a good relationship with your children. The base is there, the foundation is there.
Mhm.
If that's not there, it can be chaotic. So let's assume you've got this good relationship with your children. While you were asking the question, you know, one word comes up in my mind, and that's being real.
Mhm.
Parents must know that they're also just persons.
Mm.
Children must know my parent is just a human being.
Human. Mm.
And I believe in communicating emotions to our children. And of course, now age appropriate. You
Yes.
won't tell a 4 or 5 year old your deepest emotions of loss and devastation about this divorce. But in a way, you know, opening up towards our children so that they can look into our hearts. Being open and being honest and tell them what we are feeling. Especially teenagers, you know, they will understand it. They will understand it because they also go through that emotions.
Mm.
Um, and then to do self-care and to explain to our children that we need some time alone and that this has got nothing to do with the relationship with our children,
Mm.
but that we need some self-care. When we value self-care, and this can be for parents that's not going through a divorce. This
Mhm.
can be for a normal family where you tell your children, listen, me and dad want to go away this weekend without your children. We
Yeah.
need some alone time. That is, I'm a big believer of alone time for parents on their
Mhm.
own, but then also for the couple away from children.
Yes.
That is where we fill our emotional buckets. And when you communicate that to your child that I need some time alone, I'm actually communicating to my child that I value myself.
Mm.
I'm going to look after myself. I value myself so that when I come back from my weekend, I can give my all to you.
Mm.
And you know what? Children sometimes love it without us.
Yes,
They
they
want
do.
to be away from us. They're also tired of us
Mm.
sometimes. And it's a good sign if your child can be okay without you. So I um, encourage my parents to do self-care and to take some time out. And I think just be open and honest to your children about it and make it a habit of leaving them and looking after yourself.
Mm. I think when things are really difficult or challenging, it's also, again, a perfect opportunity for us to model to our children how we deal with loss and grief and how we deal with the devastation or the disappointment or the overwhelm. So showing them our feelings and talking to them and, yeah, modeling. This is what grief looks like. This is what sorrow looks like. This is what disappointment looks like. And this is how we deal with it or how we walk with it
Yes.
on our
And
life journey.
absolutely. And then also the hope need to say this won't last forever. You know,
Yes.
we'll always remember, we'll always have this feeling of loss, but we will get through this. There's
Yes.
hope, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Not
Always
good and lekker
fun.
now. It's not good and lekker now, but we will get through this. And then also in any loss or adversity, there's always something positive.
Mm.
And when we are resilient, our ability to see the positive things in the chaos or in the trauma,
Mm-hmm.
that's very important.
Yes.
And that's a skill that we as adults must learn. That in all adversity, in all trauma, there's always something positive. And if you can't see that something positive, you must go and get help so that somebody can help you to see the because they are. It's there.
There's always,
it's there.
yeah.
You must just see it. You must just get to it. And also show your children that, because that also brings hope and motivation to go forward.
Yeah. Very, very true. I couldn't agree with you more. So being a resilient parent is about modeling the resilience to our children.
Absolutely.
Along with all these amazing skills that you've just discussed and taught us so much about. Karen, thank you so much. It's been very insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for participating. I'm sure everybody is going to find this enlightening.
Oh, Sinta, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this hour. And it was an honor for me to share our skills with you. And I also hope that parents could only hear one or two things in this talk that can make a difference in their own lives and in their own relationships.